Hi there, thanks for joining us, appreciate it. We're really working through 1 Corinthians and we're really almost at the end. So I'm going to read verses 15 and 16. It'll be a short talk today, as will be the remaining couple of sessions just as we finish off the book. 1 Corinthians 16 and verse 15 says, I beseech you, brethren, that you know the house of Stephanas, that it is the firstfruits of Achaia, and that they have addicted themselves to the ministry of the saints, that you submit yourselves unto such, and to every one that helpeth with us and laboureth. This is in the section where there's a lot of recognition that is given to those who serve God, and this is a wonderful thing. And there is an underlying principle here that service, not status, should be the basis of honour amongst God's people. Service, not status. It's not about who you are, for we are all saved by the grace of God. And any dignity or standing we have is because of what God has done in our experience. And so there are exhortations in the previous verses that we dealt with, and there's some commentary about Apollos and Timotheus and these people. But now we've come to people that maybe wouldn't be just as well known. Paul says this, I beseech you, brethren. And then you'll notice, well, at least in the King James translations, it's in brackets, you know the house of Stephanas and so on, right to the phrase, the ministry of the saints. That's in brackets. So we need to read on that, I beseech you, brethren, that you submit yourselves unto such. So we need to come back to that. But what he's saying is the people that he's talking about in the brackets are the people that I want you to honour. We've thought about this principle of subjection in previous passages. Submission, subjection is recognising and respecting others. Now, there is an order in the family. So the husband is the head of the wife. That's not about him being the boss. It's about leadership and about responsibility that's vested in him. Children have to be subject to their parents. In the assembly, there is an order that God has placed within the context of a local church, where women have to recognise the leadership that God has vested in men. But in the same passage in Ephesians chapter 5 that talks about the relationship between a husband and wife, he's writing to a church and he tells them to be subject one to another. So there's a sense in which we've all to recognise and honour the dignity, the responsibility and the work that God has placed in his people. We've all a responsibility to do that. But here we're learning about a family that was dedicated to the service of God. They were well known. He says, you know the house of Stephanas. He's really saying, they'll automatically spring to your mind. He said, let me tell you a little secret. They're the first fruits of Achaia. He said they were the people that really I saw saved first in that region. That's a wonderful thing, isn't it? It's a great thing to see people saved. It's a great thing to be able to look back and see people that were the first fruits. I can do that here where I live in Liverpool. Think about a dear woman that was the first soul that, as far as we know, was saved. And what a thrill she is even to this day. The first fruits of Achaia. Paul, you were told by God that there were many people in this place. And here, well, the household of Stephanas, the house of Stephanas, it's the first fruits. But you know, they weren't just the first saved. They were a dedicated family. This family was consecrated and dedicated to the service of God's people. It says they have addicted themselves. Now, addiction is often seen, and rightly so, in a negative sense. But here it's in a positive sense. They have devoted themselves. They have dedicated their lives. They've addicted themselves to the service of the saints. Not too many of us do that. I'm not claiming that I do. I'm just saying there's not many of us. I'm talking generally about people amongst God's people. How many people are dedicated and addicted to serving God's people? Mind you, to be fair, there are many. I've lived up and down the United Kingdom and I've travelled a little bit, and I could tell you quite readily the people that are dedicated and devoted and addicted to serving God's people. They're a wonderful crowd of people. People who are dedicated to serving God's people. Mind you, it's like our Lord Jesus Christ. He said, I am among you as one that serves, as he got on his knees and washed their feet. He was not there to lord it over them, though he was their Lord and Master. He was dedicated, addicted to the service of the saints. Now, what have we to do with that type of person? Well, he says, submit yourself. That is, recognize them. He's not just saying that family, but unto such people who are like that. They're a sample of others. They're people, he says, they have helped with us. They've worked with us. So Paul is applying this now. He's saying, submit yourself unto such people that are like that, and to everyone that helps with us, that joins with us in the work, that's labouring in the gospel. He writes to Christians in Philippi. He talks about people that laboured in the gospel. He talks about a church that strove together for the faith of the gospel. Isn't that wonderful? We're labourers together with God, he writes earlier in this epistle, 1 Corinthians 3. He says it again in 2 Corinthians 6. He's reminding us there is labour, there is effort, there's hard work, there's sweat, there's weariness, there's fatigue that comes through serving God. Are you going to be a person that addicts yourself to serving God's people? That is a help amongst God's people, and that labours and works hard for the glory of God and for the benefit of God's people? I hope so. Now please come back and join us as we look at the concluding verses of this chapter.